Greetings and salutations. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of 10 Things I Like here on SevereMMA's YouTube page. I am your host, as always, Spencer Kyte, friendly neighborhood Spencer man, here to discuss UFC 283, which takes place on Saturday at Jeunesse Arena in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The first pay-per-view of the year, 2 title fights, a terrific main card, a very good preliminary card behind it or before it, depending on how you want to look at it. A lot of questions that I want to have answered, as we talked about yesterday on One Question for Every Fight. Some good picks, some good plays that Ian O'Neill and I will get into tomorrow on the Severe Picks and Plays. And some elements to this fight card that I really enjoy, that I really like, and we're going to dive right into them. So here we go. Item the first, Glover Teixeira getting a title fight in Brazil. So I think we all can agree that Glover Teixeira kind of got hosed with how the UFC 282 situation played out. He's in a title fight, going to rematch Yuri Prochazka. The champ has a major shoulder injury, relinquishes the title. The UFC comes to him and says, "Hey man, what do we want to do here? How are we going to do this?" And Glover says, "I'd like to fight Jan Blachowicz, was already on the card fighting Magomed Ankalaev. They have a history. They fought the previous October with Glover winning the title." And the UFC counters with, "Well, we'd really like you to fight Ankalaev, who was on a 8 or 9 fight winning streak at the time, the number 1 contender, but a very different style and a very difficult preparation for Glover," who counters and says, "Yeah, I'll fight him, but I need 6 weeks. So I need to do it in Brazil. I need to do it in Rio." And the UFC said, "Well, we kind of need a fight on this card, so we're going to go a different way. You'll get the next guy." And they move forward with Blachowicz and Ankalaev, and Glover is there watching the fight with his training partner and teammate, Alex Pereira, and we get a draw, and things work out because the UFC gets backstage. Everybody gets backstage after the draw, and in probably the span of a couple hours, maybe not even a couple hours, Glover Teixeira is booked to fight Jamal Hill. It headlines this weekend. And if you watch the UFC Countdown show, I don't know how much of it made the actual show itself. I'm privy to getting to see some of the full footage at times. It's a thing Glover talked about. I wrote about it in a story for UFC.com this week that is up now on the website. His whole demeanor, his whole approach to it coming out of 282 or during that whole situation was, "Yeah, I mean, it sucks, but things will work out. Things will find a way. I'm just going to do me. That's all I can do." And things found a way. And now here we are. UFC 283, Rio de Janeiro. He gets to challenge for the vacant title in his home country, where he hasn't fought in quite some time, against a guy that feels to me like maybe the most favorable matchup of the 3 options that were there in terms of Blachowicz, Ankalaev, and now Jamal Hill. And it's all worked out. Mellow Man Glover, things came around. He got 6 weeks to prepare. He's still fighting for the title, which is what he wanted. And so it may be a month delayed, but he could still ostensibly kick off 2023 as the light heavyweight champion, which is where he wanted to be in December. So it's had to be delayed a month, potentially. I'm happy it has worked out for Glover. He is one of the good dudes in the sport, 43 years old. Great to see him still in this position, having this resurgence of sorts. And let's see what happens on Saturday night. Be really cool if he can have that sort of, not fairy tale ending, because I don't think it's the end, but have that really cool moment of winning the title in Brazil in front of friends, family, and a raucous partisan crowd. Item 2, part 4. Davison Figueiredo, Brandon Moreno. 4th time that these 2 gentlemen have fought for the UFC flyweight title. Figueiredo enters as the champion, Moreno as the interim title holder. Every one of these fights, and it's historic. It's historic because it's the first time that 2 men have ever fought each other 4 times inside the UFC Octagon. We've had a few trilogies. We know them well. We had one conclude last year with Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway. First time it's been 4 fights. And this one, it's totally necessary. They are 1-1-1. Each man has a win, a loss, and they battled to a draw the first time, kicking off this whole thing. The added wrinkle here, and the thing that makes it extra intriguing to me, is that Moreno has the win over Kyte at the end of last July to get that interim title. Figueiredo was out dealing with a finger injury that hadn't healed in time. They put the interim title up. Moreno goes out, has a great performance, finishes Kyte, and now it sort of keeps things in line and keeps things set that we have this fourth fight. Ideally, this one resolves it, right? Ideally, we come out of this and we've got a undisputed champion, and they stick around and they are ready to defend against this wave of quality talent that exists within this division, the 125-pound weight class. Very, very good beyond these two even. Not sure if they're necessarily up to the standard of these two, but very good. And I want to see some of these fights. Pantoja, Matthias Nicolau, Manel Kape, if he gets there and gets another win. Eventually, perhaps Muhammad Makayev, some other folks. The ironic thing, and I have to give credit to my guy, Sean Madden, independent striking coach who is in Brazil this weekend working with Lauren Murphy for this idea. Man, would it be funny if this thing ended up in a no contest and we got 1-1-1-1, just ones across the board. That would be crazy. The other thing that would be kind of funny to me in a, begging for chaos, let all the chaos reign kind of way, is if Figueiredo wins, says, great, I have proven I am the best flyweight on the planet, and I'm tired of this weight cut. I'm moving up to bantamweight, and just relinquishes the title right away. And we got to do this all over again with a vacant belt, certainly including Brandon Moreno in that conversation. There's some ways this could get weird. The thing I know for sure, given their history together, is that Saturday will be entertaining. It will be a competitive, electric fight for as long as it lasts, regardless of how it plays out. And I, for one, can't wait. Item 3, a welterweight levels fight. So let me explain what I mean here. Gilbert Burns versus Neil Magny feels like a fight where it really kind of illuminates the tiers within the welterweight division quite well. For me, when I look at it, we have the championship class, which is currently Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman. Then we have the contender class, which is Bilal Muhammad, Colby Covington, Khamzat Chimaev, Gilbert Burns. And for me right now, that's it. And then we have sort of the stalwart class, as I will call it, which includes guys like Stephen Thompson, Jorge Masvidal, Neil Magny, who fights Gilbert Burns here. There's still the emerging class. I would even put Vicente Luque in that group, not to leave Luque out of this. Then we have an emerging class behind them, Jeff Neal and Shavkat Rakhmonov, who are going to fight in March at UFC 285. That card is shaping up to be amazing. I think 286 is going to be as well. It's going to be a good year in terms of pay-per-views. Can't wait. And so I think this fight, I talk all the time about levels and tiers and tests and having to prove yourself capable of advancing to those next levels. And I think this fight will really put an illustration to Gilbert Burns is in one level, Neil Magny is in another, and now it's quite clear to everybody. I asked yesterday on one question, if Gilbert Burns would go out here and make sort of a statement and kind of look to have that big performance that illustrates exactly this. I'm a contender. He's not in my group. Stop putting me in here with these guys. Bring me Colby. Bring me Masvidal. Bring me Bilal Muhammad. And I think that's what we see. And listen, there's nothing wrong. As I have said many times over and will continue to say, there is nothing wrong with being Neil Magny. The vast majority of the welterweight division would happily trade places with Neil Magny. Take that number 11, 12, whatever it is next to his name, and ride that out for 4 or 5 years as he has. And he's climbed into the top 10. I think he's been as high as number 6 or 7 in the division. They would happily take that. The vast majority of people. understandably, it is a good job. It is a good racket if you can get it. And I don't mean that it's like it's just, we get so caught up in champions or not, championships or bust, first or last, all of that junk. It's dumb. Being Neil Magny is great, but I think we see on Saturday that there is a difference. And I think Gilbert Burns will go out and make that point clear. I want to see if that's the approach he takes. I want to see if that's what we get, because so far we've sort of, there's that possibility that maybe Neil Magny sneaks in. Is Gilbert Burns getting he's coming off a loss. He's lost 2 or 3. I think we see it. I think he makes a statement. I think we see the tiers of this division sort of laid out plainly in front of us on Saturday on pay-per-view. Item 4, absolute banger in the flyweight division. Jessica Andrade back up after a win at 115 over Amanda Lemos, first round submission win last year. Said yesterday that she's 1-1 in the division. I misspoke. I made a couple mistakes yesterday. Off my game a little bit. She is 2-1 in the division because after the loss to Valentina Shevchenko, she rebounded with a win over Cynthia Calvillo before going back down. Lauren Murphy is coming off a win where she looked amazing against Miesha Tate. Cleaned some stuff up in the striking department, was a lot more aggressive and just felt a lot more technical, a lot more precise. Her punches, her strikes in general seemed a lot crisper. And so not only is this a super competitive fight in terms of where they stand in the division, and as I said yesterday, the question being kind of where do each of them fit in terms of the title picture, but it's also in terms of the division itself, because this division is shifting and changing, still really strong. But I think this is the year that we see some of those younger athletes like Erin Blanchfield, Casey O'Neill, Macy Barber, Miranda Maverick, maybe a step behind, really make a push, really get an opportunity to work their way into the top 10, the top 5, even as we're seeing with Erin Blanchfield next month, taking on recent title challenger Tyler Santos. So their winner here remains in the mix, is very much still in the title conversation. I think whoever ends up on the wrong side of these results doesn't fall too far back, probably becomes somebody in the range of facing, I know Casey O'Neill has a fight on deck already, Jennifer Maia, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, but falls into that position of maybe is the next person to face Macy Barber or Miranda Maverick or somebody of that ilk. Going to be a good fight. Really, really curious about this one. Want to see what Andrade brings back up at 125. Want to see how much of Lauren Murphy's performance against Miesha Tate was real and replicable. Going to be a great fight. Number 5, kicking off the main card, Paul Craig is fighting. I told you yesterday on one question, this was going to be here. This was going to be one of the 10. Win or lose, Paul Craig fights are fun to watch. Right to the very end, right to the last second. And he's made it that way because of the fight with Magomed Ankalaev, where he is the only man in the UFC to defeat, only man period for that matter, to defeat Magomed Ankalaev, lacing up a triangle choke in the final seconds of their fight several years ago. The other part of it is that whether he gets the win or not, whether he gets people to play into his game, you are just transfixed watching this dude fight, because he will just go to his back and take a whole bunch of smacks where you're like, one of these is going to put him out, but he's still working on wrist control and he's still looking for a triangle setup and he's still looking for an arm bar and his hips are still moving and he's still active. And you just sit there wondering if something's going to happen, waiting to see what's going to happen. And even the fight last time out against Volkan Ozdemir, where Ozdemir did the absolute correct thing and was like, I'm not bothering with you on the ground, lad. Just every time you get there, please get back up and we can get back to trading in space, clinch a little bit. You fall to the canvas trying to get me there. I step back and we repeat. You're still looking to see if there's a point where Ozdemir commits, or there's a point where Craig can grab a leg and drag him to the ground and force him down there, or get something started in one of those clinch positions. And now on Saturday, he's facing a certified wild man in Johnny Walker. Like, this is a first-rate, could be all kinds of crazy type of fight. Because if you're looking for somebody if you're looking for sort of like the ideal person that would be brash and confident and crazy enough to decide, I'm absolutely going to play with Paul Craig on the ground, it's Johnny Walker. If anyone in this division, it's Johnny Walker. Even though he will have a distinct striking advantage, should just stand at range, throw big shots, see if he can get Paul Craig out of there. If anybody in this division is going to decide, you know what, I really want to fuck around with Paul Craig on the canvas, probably Johnny Walker. So we're probably going to get just chaos, just fascinating, tense. What the hell is going to happen here? Chaos. And I cannot wait for it. Let's go. Item 6, Shogun send-off. So let me be clear here, okay? Let me be clear. I am happy that the 41-year-old veteran is going out in Brazil and will get a absolutely thunderous ovation on the way to the Octagon. I want this for him. He deserves it after a 20-year career, after all the things he has accomplished, what he means to that country, both in terms of his celebrity and his popularity, but also in terms of who he was during the rise of MMA as a really, really truly a spectator sport the way it is now. He was, if you haven't, just pull up Fight Pass, pull up whatever you use to watch old fights, and just go watch some of those Pride fights. Just do it. He is the quintessential. So I'm an NBA guy. We talk all the time about Russian center Arvydas Sabonis being this mythical figure when he played in Europe, when he played for the Russian national team. And we only saw him come to the NBA after he had myriad lower extremity issues, a couple Achilles, a couple knees, things like that. And there were still moments where you were like, Jesus, imagine this guy in his prime. That's who Shogun feels like to me. There were still really good moments. Won the light heavyweight title. Had some great performances. But the guy that we saw in the UFC wasn't even as good as the guy that we saw in Pride. So do yourself a favor. Go check those out if you haven't already. I'm happy he's getting this send-off. It's his first time on a Brazilian pay-per-view since UFC 198 in Curitiba. I wish he wasn't 41. Like, I wish he wasn't coming off 2 losses. I wish, that there wasn't a strong likelihood, or at least a solid likelihood, that he gets knocked out. I wish this was, 4 or 5 years ago when I could have felt much better about his chances. But I like that he's going to get the moment of walking out, getting that roar, getting that pop, getting the big introduction, and having that moment. I hope that things work out for him in terms of the fight itself. I hope he gets a positive result. I hope we get to have a post-fight interview where he's coming off a victory and we're not trying to talk to him after a crushing defeat. But I'm happy he's getting the send-off moment. And I hope we end up happy after it. Item 7, the return of Thiago Moises. As I've talked about both on the Fighters to Watch series in the lightweights and yesterday in terms of one question, I'm really intrigued by Thiago Moises this year. Dominated Christos Giagos last time out. Loved the finish, loved the setup of the rear naked choke. Turns 28 in March. He's got a winnable matchup here against Melk Costa. And for me, I hope to find out this year whether he is sort of that guy that was in too deep too early, or whether he's that guy that we learned we learned the ceiling right away. And then we just spent a bunch of years being like, oh, but he's, he was young and maybe it's just, he just needs to grow and develop, and he never actually gets there. So the reason I'm always curious, especially with fighters in this age range and who have fought and lost to really good competition exclusively, is that we've seen athletes like this turn it around and progress and take that next step in this age range, in the 28 through 32. The two most obvious guys that come to mind very recently are Dustin Poirier and Charles Oliveira. I'm not saying that Thiago Moises is on their level, going to be their level, probably will not be at that level. Don't think he will be a championship level fighter. But can he be a perennial sort of 6 through 10, 6 through 15 guy in this division, which is saying something because lightweight is full of goddamn sharks? That's what I want to know. This fight isn't necessarily going to tell us, although this is one of those fights where if he is, then we're going to see it. We're going to at least see him go out and dominate this fight and get a very quick win, similar to the fight with Christos Giagos in a way. Very curious about it. Item number 8, the brothers Bonfim debut. And so yesterday, this is the other mistake that I made that I want to correct, that I want to clean up here. I believe I flipped them yesterday. So older brother Ishmael is 27. He is 18-3. He is facing Terrence McKinney. Younger brother Gabriel is 25. He is 13-0 overall. He is facing Munir Laziz. Both really competitive fights, both very interesting fights. We'll get a little bit to McKinney later. I just want to see, like, these things are always fascinating to me. As I talked about yesterday in terms of one question, I want to see, and again, I flipped them around. I had them backwards. So it's actually how will little brother react after big brother's fight? And I think having them in that order is probably good because big brother can come back, win or lose, and say, no, man, settle his little brother, get him ready to go out. But it's still an interesting thing, as is just having siblings in the UFC, right? We haven't seen, I don't think there's been, for the way I judge success or the way I judge careers, there hasn't really been a sibling duo that has had tremendous success jointly, each of them, right? We've had one brother that was great and one that wasn't, in terms of, Matt Hughes and his brother. Matt Serra achieved success. His brother had a couple cups of coffee in the UFC. To a lesser extent, or maybe slightly better than those two, we've seen Valentina Shevchenko and Antonina Shevchenko. Val, obviously, championship success. Antonina, not quite as much. But I don't think we've seen sort of two brothers both be in that pretty good, in the mix, having success. The Millers came to me closest, Jim and Dan. The Ellenbergers had some success. Jake was a contender at lightweight or at welterweight, while Joe was coming up and making it to the UFC, but Joe unfortunately didn't have as much success. And so I'm curious to see if these guys, and if the Basharats, Javid fought last week, Farrett is fighting in a couple of weeks' time, see if either of them can just have some success together. It's always a cool story. It's always interesting to see, and I want to see how it shakes out on Saturday. Item 9. Another Almeida test. I say it all the time. I talk about it forever, ad nauseum, right? Just give me more tests. Let me see the fights that provide me answers, that provide me information. So Jailton Almeida faces Shamil Abdurahimov on Saturday. It's the third time this fight has been booked. Clearly, it is a fight the UFC wants to see. It is a test the UFC wants to see the Brazilian go through, sit through. He's 3-0 in the UFC, won 12 straight overall. And I'm really, truthfully, still not sure where he fits in this division, but we're going to keep finding out, because everything from here on out is that question, is that sort of assessment of where the floor is and where the ceiling is. If he goes out and smashes Shamil Abdurahimov, who is a good test despite coming in, having lost 3 straight all by TKO, it again tells us something. I don't care that the man is 41 and hasn't won a fight in his last 3. He's still a proven, established heavyweight in this division, in the UFC, and to my opinion, slightly undersized guy in Almeida may struggle with him. May not. We're going to find out. I love seeing athletes tested. I want most fights to be about discerning answers about one or both parties. Not always. Sometimes you can just have fights. There's a couple on this card that are really truthfully just fights. But for the most part, I want tests and I want answers. We're going to get that in that heavyweight fight. Last one. Chance to see Terrence McKinney's improvements. So as I said, I had it backwards yesterday. Gabriel is the younger, Ismail is the elder. Ismail fights McKinney here. He's 18-3, and he is a good test for Terrence McKinney, who to this point has 3 wins over good but not great competition. So knocked out Matt Frivola on short notice in his debut, beat Fares Zayem, lost to Drew Dober, and then beat Eric Gonzalez. Good wins. All the wins are in the first round. We've seen the explosiveness. We've seen the finishing ability of Terrence McKinney. We also saw in the Drew Dober fight that there are some holes. There are some skill gaps. There are some intangible and maybe IQ gaps in terms of fight IQ, right? In terms of how to execute with Terrence McKinney. And so this, for me, hopefully, is the next chance to see if he's addressed those things. Because it's one thing to go out here and storm through Eric Gonzalez or Fares Zayem as he did. But it's another thing to have to make adjustments. And McKinney, I don't think he's ever going to be this fighter because he's traditionally just bombed through first round fights. You look at his record, it's a lot of first round finishes one way or the other. But he, to me, would really benefit from taking a little bit of the Ian Gary approach that Ian Gary took last year of, great, I'm going to come out here and I'm going to use this time to learn on the job and to test some of the stuff I've done in the gym and to put myself in some situations that I need to work through live, because the only way I'm going to experience them, the only way I'm going to learn how to deal with them is by working through them live against somebody that isn't a training partner who's going to just take it a little bit easy on me in those absolute worst spots. I would like to see Terrence McKinney get a 3-round fight in, go the distance with somebody, dominate all you want, beat the holy hell out of them. And if it gets stopped, fine, but get in there and don't rush. Don't hurry. Let the fight come to you a little bit and let me see that you can make some of these adjustments on the fly. And that's why I think this fight with Bonfim is an interesting fight, because this is a guy that's got 21 fights. And while he too has been a early finisher and a quick finisher, I have a feeling there'll be a little bit of not jitters, but need a minute or two to settle in and maybe comes out and presses McKinney early and makes T-Rex be a little defensive, be a little more patient. Overall, I'm through the roof on his talent in terms of his skill, but I want to see the work on the intangibles. I want to see the development of that fight IQ, because that's going to be the piece that dictates whether Terrence McKinney becomes a championship contender or just remains a really entertaining, fun dude to watch 2, 3, 4 times a year that never quite got over the hump, right? Does he become a Dustin Poirier, or does he stick around as being, Eric Silva? Remember Eric Silva back in the day? Looked the part, had all the stuff that you were like, this dude is going to be, but just couldn't put it all together, couldn't figure it all out. I think McKinney has the talent, the fundamentals, the base abilities to be very, very good. It's going to be the intangibles and the putting it all together and the understanding how to deploy those considerable weapons that dictates how far he goes in the UFC. That, my friends, is it for the show. Those are the 10 things I like for UFC Vegas 283. As I said off the top, Saturday, Jeunesse Arena in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, live exclusively on pay-per-view. Check your local providers for how to view the show. Thank you for viewing this show. Please check out the UFC 283 preview show, myself, Ian O'Neill, and Harry Powell. Come back around tomorrow for myself and Ian doing the severe picks and plays. One of us made money last week. The other is Ian. We will have a good time with that. We're finding our footing with it. This is going to be week 2. We're going to see if we can keep things rolling, find a nice rhythm between the two of us. Saturday, I will put together 10 things that we learned from watching the fight and being there watching, recapping the fights as we go on the website itself, SevereMMA.com. While you are there, throw a /pints in the URL website line. I don't even remember what that's called anymore because I don't refer to websites by their URLs very often, but use that one, SevereMMA.com /pints to sign up for the Patreon. It is the best in the business. Well worth the price of admission. Check that out. Check out all the lads on Twitter. Follow me at Spencer Kyte. Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate your time. Hope you're getting excited. That's the purpose of these. Get you excited. Get you thinking about some stuff that's coming up on Saturday that you are now looking forward to. These are the things I'm looking forward to. I hope we share some of them. I hope some of them are new to you now. I can't wait for this fight card. It's going to be great. Until I talk to you tomorrow with Ian, thank you for watching. Love you. Appreciate you. Take care of yourselves. Take care of one another.